Session of day one. Killi Resources CEO Kathryn Cutler is a West Australian School of Mines geology graduate with 15 years plus experience. She's worked dominantly in the junior exploration space of the mining industry with experience in various commodities across Australia. With the Killi Resources story, please welcome Kathryn Cutler.
Right, well, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us for the last session. Hope everyone's had a cup of tea and maybe a tart. Standard disclaimer, and for the next 15 minutes, I'm going to tell you about Killi Resources. Would I be able to get the presentation on this screen? Possible? So don't turn around. This slide here is the board and management and our corporate structure. Most of you will recognise some of the faces there. Richard Bevan, Greg Miles and Philip Warren were all the founding directors of Killi Resources, which had the Nebo Babel nickel copper project in the West Musgraves and now currently sits in the Oz Minerals portfolio and may be changing positions again shortly. I myself, as Jerry said, have 15 years experience in the mining industry. I'm an exploration geologist at heart. I love it. It's the best job in the world. And my focus is greenfields exploration and finding new deposits and new mineralisation systems. Killi floated on the stock exchange Feb 10 this year. We issued 30 million shares at 20 cents to raise $6 million. You can see the directors and management own just under 4% and the top 20 just under 44%. We're a tightly held company with only 52 million shares on offer. So within our portfolio, we have 4 projects. Working from west to east, we have the Balfour project in the Pilbara, just near Jigalong. It's a potential copper, sediment-hosted copper system within the Proterozoic rift. And that tenement was granted this year. At the time of OPO, it was not yet granted. Our flagship project is the West Tanami project, and that's prospective for gold, rare earths, and more recently, copper. Ravenswood North over in Queensland in the Charters Towers district is gold and copper play on the main Ravenswood corridor there, inland from Townsville, 100 kilometres. And lastly, the Mount Rawdon West project, which is a gold and copper play near Mount Rawdon and the Sol Gold Mount Perry project. Let's start in the West Tanami, being our predominant focus for this year. We've got a really large tenement holding, about 1,600 square kilometres of tenure, and it crosses the prospective Tanami fault systems. This is a well-endowed gold mineral deposit. Callie Gold Mine sits on the Northern Territory side of the belt and hosts plus 14 million ounces of gold. It's a really significant sediment-hosted gold system. Only 100 k's long strike is where our tenement package is located. And what we're looking for there is we're looking for something of similar value. The main mineralising structure for Callie extends from the Northern Territory side, is offset by the Tanami fault and extends over to the West Australian side. So that's what we're looking for there. Also on this map, you'll realise that we have the Browns Range Northern Minerals rare earth deposit only sits 40 kilometres north of our northern tenement boundary. And just along to the eastern side of our tenement package there's 2 recent rare earth occurrences, Watts Rise and Killi East, where they found surface expressions of rare earths. This is the tenement package. On the eastern side is Coyote Gold Mine and Kookaburra. They account for some 700,000 ounces of gold. Currently just moved into the Black Cat Syndicate portfolio. It was owned previously by Northern Star. And the Watts Rise and Killi East rare earth trend you can see there on the eastern margin as well. Now the gold and rare earths are found within the same geological setting. You're looking for hydrothermal systems, and those structures propagate into the tenement package that we control. So In saying that, looking for gold and rare earths in the same sort of system, you can actually look for them with the same drilling targets. So we don't have to split our financial position for rare earths or gold. We can look for them concurrently and in parallel. Since we floated, which was only 9 months ago, we've hit the ground running. We've done an awful lot of work in that time period, and being out in the Tanami is no small feat considering the remoteness of location. We've identified 95 kilometres of prospective rare earth strike, 100 kilometres of prospective gold strike. We flew 1,000 square kilometres of airborne magnetics and radiometrics to help with the structural understanding for the gold prospectivity, as well as for surface expressions from the radiometrics for rare earths. We completed 10,000 metres of air core drilling. We completed a deep stratigraphic diamond hole as part of an EIS funded grant where we won $150,000 towards the drilling of the drill hole. And that was on the back of the Geological Survey thought we had solid merit for looking for the same stratigraphic unit that is responsible for the Killi gold mine on our tenement package on the other side of the border in WA. We released a couple of weeks ago some of the visual observations from that diamond hole. Because it's so remote and because it's so underexplored, we really didn't know what we were going to drill, what we were going to expect in the diamond hole. We did intersect a sedimentary package at the top portion of the hole for the top 600 metres. In the last 200 metres, we had these intervals of mafic units, gabbros and dolerites. So we, number one, weren't expecting that. Number two, we're not expecting to see visual copper mineralisation within those mafics. So we intersected a zone of 10 metres of massive and semi-massive sulphides, dominantly pyrrhotite with chalcopyrite in multiple different events and different mineralisation patterns. You can see the diamond core there at the bottom. You've got these zones of striated chalcopyrite as well as really large chalcopyrite crystals. So that's something interesting that we weren't anticipating that we would intersect. However, something like this is what that whole premise around an EIS funded grant is. We have no idea what's within the stratigraphic sequence. So exploring and finding something like this could potentially open the belt up to something something different. Copper has not been documented in the Tanami belt. So there's nothing for me to reference in that respect. It's we're sort of blazing our own trail and we'll see what we come up with. So if we move over to Queensland, this was the other project we were able to get on this year. And it's our gold and copper project, just inland about 100 k's from Townsville. And it's within Charters Towers Goldfield. You've got some monstrous gold deposits here, gold and silver. You've got Ravenswood, Mount Lation, Mount Wright, Mount Success. These are all really large gold systems, intrusive style gold systems. We hold 660 square kilometres of tenure. There's 11 million ounces of gold sitting there in endowment, which is pretty impressive. And most recently, this area has seen a lot of exploration start. So last year, there was a couple of companies that floated solely on assets in this area. So it's pretty exciting to be part of this project. We focused in this year on the Ravenswood corridor predominantly. A lot of this area has been looked at previously. Other explorers have been out there. In the 1980s, they collected a whole lot of streams, soils and rock chips. They returned some really great results, but they weren't able to follow them up for whatever reason. So that's what we're doing. We can leverage off the historical data, which are pretty fantastic anomalous zones to start with. We followed up a rock chip sample, or two rock chip samples. There's 17 grams per tonne gold and 5 grams per tonne silver, and 16 grams per tonne gold and 7 grams per tonne silver at surface. There was nothing else here. We went out and completed a soil grid over the area, and what came back was a 1.5 kilometre squared geochemical anomaly, anomalous for gold, silver, moly and copper. I mean, if this was in WA, I'd be jumping up and down, you know, or everyone would be and fighting me to drill it. But in Queensland, you know, they're pretty lucky with some really good good mineralisation at surface. We released last week, we went back out again after the soil program and collected further surface rock chip samples, and we got some high grade results there. 224 grams per tonne silver is nothing to be sneezed at, including 0.2% copper. So that's really exciting. Heritage survey was finished today on the project in order to enable us to get on the ground. We anticipate access approvals for access next week, and then after that we'll be drilling. West Branch is another follow-up. This was of some stream sediment samples. So we had a 610 ppb and a 270 ppb gold stream sediment anomaly. It was pretty high. The guys went out and did a recon over the area and took rock chip samples, and we got some really awesome surface rock chip results. 5 and 6% copper, 10% silver, up to an ounce silver, and 8-9 grams per tonne gold. So West Branch sits as our secondary target and will be followed up after our Rocky target. Now, I was only going to cover off on West Tanami and Ravenswood North because that's where we managed to complete our fieldwork this year. But I couldn't help myself. I'm going to show you the Mount Rawdon West project as well. This is inland from Bundaberg. This is a 300 square kilometre tenement package, and it's sandwiched between Mount Rawdon's Evolution Mine and SolGold's Mount Perry project, and it covers the intersection of two main copper-gold mineralising structures. At surface, we have copper mineralisation and gold mineralisation in rock chips. There's historical adits. There's historical molybdenum mine head frames. And what we're looking for here is an intrusive style copper system. And if anyone knows anything about porphyry style copper systems, you need moly. So the idea that we have molybdenum mine head frames on the project, pretty good indication of what we're looking for. This is a really historic mining area. It's found in 1862. On the tenement itself sits the base of the old copper smelter, which is pretty impressive to see. About 200 square metres of copper slag tiles that cover the old smelter itself are still there. Also of interest is that this entire tenement has not one drill hole on it. So I don't know how that's possible, but it's true. So this sits within our portfolio as a priority that we'll be following up and exploring next year. So project pipeline, we're drilling and completing fieldwork over in Ravenswood North up until Christmas. We have the results of the air core RC, the diamond assays from West Tanami coming out shortly. And then the results of Rocky will come out Q1 next year. So why do you want to be involved? Look, we've got 4 really great belt scale projects. Scale is the key word here. We've got the experienced team that are really focused on finding new discoveries, new mineral systems. Our market cap is currently poised for discovery at just under 9 mil. Our heritage surveys, as I said before, the heritage survey finished today. Approvals are expected next week, and a drill rig will follow soon after that. And that will be drilling the Rocky prospect that we have, as well as we have all the results to come out for our Tanami project very shortly. That's me done.
Thank you, Kathryn. Western Mines Group is focused on a major new unexplored Kamata, I'll have a crack at that later, nickel sulfide undercover in WA's Eastern Yilgarn. Managing Director, Dr. Caedmon Marriott, is here to tell us more about their exciting Phase 2 drilling program at the Mulga Tank Project, due to commence soon. Can you pronounce that for me, please?
Kamatite or my name?
No, your name's fine.
No.
It's the Kamatite.
Kamatite nickel
okay.
system.
Please make them welcome.
Well, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. And thank you to Vertical Events for the opportunity to present Western Mines here this afternoon. Here's our standard disclaimer, which I'll assume everyone has read. And just briefly on Western Mines, it's still a relatively young company that we listed in July last year. We have 8 projects, all in Western Australia, focused on nickel and gold. And of those, we have 2 kind of priority projects, being the Mulga Tank nickel Komartite system, which I'll mostly be talking about today. And then also we have a very exciting gold project at Jasper Hill near Laverton. We've still got a very tight capital structure with less than 50 million shares on issue. We recently completed a placement last week to a new strategic cornerstone investor, the Quentia Natural Resources, which topped us up for a drilling program at Mulga Tank, which actually commenced about 3 hours ago. So this presentation is already out of date. And we think we offer, very exciting risk reward on this exploration program, very low EV, and very significant near-term news flow. So preaching to the converted in this room, I'm sure, Western Australia's Yilgarn Creighton, obviously a major nickel province, and many world-class examples of Komartite-hosted nickel deposits. The end members here that we think we're kind of exploring for are, a type 1 would be a Kambalda or a Perseverance, or a more of a disseminated style would be Mount Keith. And so in this area, where do you go looking for kind of potential new deposits? Where's underexplored? And we think we have that at Mulga Tank. It's a frontier exploration play, yet it's just 2.5 hours east of Kalgoorlie. As you head out here along the Tropicana Road, you're moving to the edge of the Great Victorian Desert. So we're undercover here, under about 50 or 60 meters of sand cover, which is why we think this project has been previously very underexplored. We've strategically put together a ballpark sort of 400-meter square position on the Menigwal Greenstone Belt, where we own the whole of the Mulga Tank ultramafic complex of a comparable scale to the Kambalda Dome Camp. We believe this is very highly prospective for nickel sulfide mineralization. And so just zooming in on the Menigwal Belt, this isn't all of it, but this is sharing a aeromagnetic image. There's certainly a belt scale opportunity here. We think we have a major underexplored Komartite system with a very large mesoccumulate adcumulate dunite body down in the south there, and then interpreted Komartite channel flows of about 12 to 15 kilometers continuing up the belt. There's been very limited drilling here, penetrating beneath the sand. There were 10 holes drilled before we acquired the project. And of that, I think 7 of them showed this nickel sulfide mineralization. And we recently completed another 10, and again, 6 of those show visible sulfides. So we think there's very ample evidence for a large-scale working mineral system here, showing all the key ingredients. It's Komartite magma. It's come up through the crust. There's a major terrain boundary just about 20 kilometers to the west of us. It's very clearly sulfur saturated. And we're seeing obviously partitioning of the nickel into those sulfides. And so just leaving that last key ingredient is, where are we seeing the concentration of these deposits? And that's obviously what we're looking for now. So just to labor that point on, when we say a working sulfide system, we very much mean a working nickel sulfide system. And we see pentlandite everywhere in this drill cores. Both for a sort of a type 1 Perseverance style. We see a lot of remobilized nickel sulfide veins, which can only be remobilized from a massive sulfide source. So we're currently hunting that down. And then also one of the holes in our recent program that I'll talk to on the next slides drilled well over 300 meters of disseminated nickel sulfide, very similar to a Mount Keith style, where we're seeing these beautiful interstitial pentonite blebs within the adcumulate olivine dunite. And so our exploration is led by Dr. Ben Gregoric, who joined us recently, considered WA expert, particularly on Mount Keith, where he spent a lot of his early career at WMC, BHP and Norilsk Nickel. And we're very much building a very robust exploration model across this play. We are blessed with quite a decent historic data set of a number of different things, both air mag, gravity, heli-SAM, and various other things of which we've sort of built on since IPOing last year. We went out and did a lot of ground-based geophysics, both high-resolution gravity and high-powered moving loop. And that we built up into our first drilling program, which was between April and July this year, where we drilled 10 holes for about 4,000 meters. And again, we had our phase 2 program has just commenced. So in phase 1, we deliberately targeted 10 holes spreading around this large intrusion. We wanted to avoid some of the things that had previously done here where people had drilled sort of multiple holes clustered together. We wanted to get a good sense of a range of different target styles here, both drilling geophysical targets for sort of EM conductors, but also geological targets where we had some sort of vector on either previous drilling or soil geochemistry or something like that. And so of the 10 holes, 6 of those showed visible nickel sulfides. And I'll just talk to some of those results, but certainly on the more the western side of the intrusion above this large EM anomaly, with the Y conductor that we call the Mulga Monster, the holes through there saw a lot of remobilized nickel veining all down the hole. And so the question then becomes, where is this remobilizing from? And so we'll be following up on that when we get to this second phase of drilling. Now, this is sort of this western size we very much think of as a sort of a Perseverance style target. And then extending to the northwest off the intrusion, we move very much into a Komatiite, and we think of this as very sort of a Kambalda style of these Komatiite channels. There was a historic hole drilled here, which showed, again, high-grade remobilized nickel sulfide veins running at sort of only 25 centimeters of 3.8% nickel and copper and PGEs. We attempted to drill underneath it and again came up with similar results, 6 or 7 very sort of skinny remobilized sulfide veins. And on the basis of downhole EM, we've now identified this very nice off-hole conductor at the base of the channel, which will form one of our follow-up holes in the current program. And then finally, just to talk to a sort of a type 2 and more of a Mount Keith style. This was a hole down in the southeast corner of the intrusion where we attempted to drill under hole 11, drilled by previous owners of the project. And here we encountered well over 300 meters of disseminated sulfide, which we've assayed at about 175 meters at 0.27% nickel with associated copper and PGE credits. I much think we're on sort of the edge of a large mineralized system here. It's a very high MgO olivine adcumulate to extreme adcumulate, very high sulfur, and we're seeing these visible disseminated sulfides, which recent mineralogical work shows that it's pentlanite interstitial within the olivine. And then the last one on the bottom here that you can't quite see, but we did we attempted to do an aqua regia versus a 4-acid digest, and we get essentially exactly the same results. And what we're not want to shout this too loud, what we think this is showing is that essentially all of the nickel here is within sulfide versus being silicate-based nickel. And so, of course, what you're looking in something like a Mount Keith that runs at 0.6% nickel, 0.4 of that generally is kind of within silicate. So you're looking for a kind of a better than a 0.2% nickel margin in order to be economic. So we think here this high-grade pentlanite within this sulfide would certainly beneficiate into a high-grade concentrate. So this we think we're chasing very major targets here. So we put in for a government EIS exploration incentive scheme grant, where we recently were awarded the maximum award of 220,000 to drill 2 deep diamond holes, which we're going to drill into the center of the intrusion. And this is just to put something like the Mulga Tank ultramafic complex next to the Perseverance complex on a very similar scale. And again, you're seeing these dunite bodies, and we're chasing this EM target at the base of the dunite in a very similar position Perseverance. So these two EIS holes will certainly, we hope, will unlock this complex, give us a great handle on the architecture of it, which will lead into phase 3 of the drilling. So putting all that together, we've just started a 6-hole program today, of which we'll be drilling hole 22, which we've just started on, which is following up between holes 12 and 13 on the western side there. Again, this is testing beneath these remobilized massive sulfide veins, testing this large EM conductor at depth. Hole 23 will be just to the northwest there, again following up on in the panhandle for more a Cambaldas style. Hole 24, we're going to drill beneath that large disseminated sulfide intersection, following up on a Mount Keith style. And hole 25 in the southwest there, again, a very nice off-hole conductor that we're going to, again, test with this. And then within the center there, the 2 EIS holes, we really hope will give us a large a handle on what's going on this in this system. So just in summary, to keep it brief, I mean, we're very excited by the project that we have here. We believe that there are multiple nickel deposits that could be found at Mulga Tank. We always strive to do very sort of high quality technical work, very frugal with our overheads, trying to maximize that exploration spend here, minimize equity dilution, because of course we're trying to enrich our shareholders here, and we all benefit from a massive increase in re-rating of the company on any exploration success. Thank you very much.
Michael Naylor has over 26 years' experience in corporate advisory and public company management since commencing his career and qualifying as a chartered accountant. Michael has been involved in the financial management of mineral and resources-focused public companies, serving on the board and in the executive management team, focusing on advancing and developing mineral resource assets and business development. He's a co-founder and current director of Bellevue Gold, Orteco Minerals, and now Cygnus Gold, which he will talk to us about today. Please welcome Michael Naylor.
Thanks for that, and thanks for the opportunity to present the Cygnus Gold story to the current crowd. We acquired a project in the James Bay region in Canada in July of this year, and we're in a Tier 1 lithium district. There's not too many districts in the world that have the lithium endowment such as the James Bay region in Canada. Drilling has already outlined spodumene over 620 metre strike length. We acquired this project from a Canadian junior that really was starved of cash, and what we liked about it is that they pumped 25 holes into this project over a 620 metre length outcrop, and every single hole hit spodumene. So fantastic strike rate. And what we also like about it is the maximum vertical depth of this drilling was down 80 metres. So these guys barely scraped the surface from what we think is a really well-endowed lithium district. We have also acquired an additional 40 kilometres of strike along a fertile greenstone belt in the James Bay district. So we initially acquired 10 kilometres of strike with outcropping of pegmatites through the whole district, and now we've got 40 kilometres. We're well funded here with 9 million in the bank and a market cap now of 81 million. So we're certainly getting on people's radars, and we've certainly got a shareholder base which is supporting what we're doing. We have excellent infrastructure up there in Quebec. We're 4 kilometres off a main highway, and there's, we've got access to the hydropower that makes cheap energy up there as well. Another thing that we bring to the table, we have a highly experienced management team. As co-founders of Bellevue Gold, which we grew from discovery hole to over $1 billion company. We're also fortunate enough to have David Southam join as managing director. So he'll be taking, I guess, my place in a couple months' time. And as you all know, he built Mincor from nothing to over $1 billion company too. So here we are. We're in the heartland of the James Bay region, just here. So we got Allcam's James Bay project up here, 40 million tonnes. We got Patriot discovery up there, Corvette, which is a world-class discovery. And we've got Sayona in the region, Master in the region. So we're really excited about where we sit. From what we've got here, we've got a number of high-grade intercepts. Like I said, 25 out of 25 holes all hit spodumene. 15 meters at 1.6, 13 at 1.4, and interestingly, that 15.6 meters at 1.6% lithium is the deepest hole on section. So once again, this is horribly underexplored from what is a premium lithium district. We've just completed LiDAR and magnetics across, I guess, the initial 10-kilometre strike of our tenements. And what we've unearthed there is just a multitude of pegmatites. So we've got 12 or 13 outcroppings and some that sit out undercover. So we've just done some rock chip sampling and some channel sampling that sits along that strike. Interestingly, the previous owners did do met test work and they got a 6% spodumene concentrate using conventional processing techniques. So we know the metallurgy works well in this area too. And we have embarked on a drilling campaign, 10,000 metres, commenced early November. And if you ever followed our story through the Bellevue and Orteco, at Bellevue we've drilled 450,000 metres over a 4 to 5 year period. And Orteco we've drilled 150,000 metres over a 3-year period. We see this as a really fertile greenstone belt, and we certainly want to hit this hard. We're good explorers, and we don't die wondering. Just a little bit about Quebec. We think this hub in particular is going to be really important to the lithium industry. I've just spent a month up in Canada, and there seems to be a bit of a battle between Ontario and Quebec about who's going to be the premier lithium province up there. They're both really well endowed, but certainly Quebec, being on the doorstep of the America, which is the second largest EV market in the world, are craving lithium and critical minerals. So they're throwing money at Canada, in particular the US, and we've even received from the Quebec government a grant to do drilling and metallurgical test work, which is unbelievable. They're supporting the industry up there, which is fantastic to see. Another interesting point that I think is really important is the vertical integration that's occurring at the moment. I heard earlier that GT1 are going to do their own vertical integration, but just going back one slide, Allchem up here in the James Bay region have said that they're going to build a downstream processing plant. They're doing a BFS on it right now, and they've publicly stated in their strategy document that not only want to do it for their own project, but they want to do it for the whole region. So I think that's really interesting from a strategic perspective, and that is literally 50 kilometres up the road on a main highway. So from an infrastructure perspective, that just puts us in really good stead, and the timing couldn't be better for us. Just a bit on our shareholder summary here. We've got 165 million shares on issue. We've got a market cap just over 81 million. We've got 9 million in the bank, so we're certainly well funded to do the 10,000 metre drill program. We've got one rig going at the moment, and we'll look at multiple rigs on this asset in the next 2 to 3 months. We've got a really good institutional shareholder base. We've got Merck, which is a really big North American institution, at 9.9%. And from an institutional perspective, we're well over 25 to 30% institutionalised already. We've got Terra Capital, we've got RCF on our register. And we've also got Steve Parsons, who's the founder of Bellevue Gold, sitting there at 5.7%. This is his only other paid gig outside of Bellevue. So he's certainly got a great geological and marketing profession, and he certainly helps us out as we go forward. So just a little bit again on the board of directors. We think we've got a stellar board. We've got Ray Shorrocks. I mean, you've got the theme here. He's founding chairman of Bellevue Gold. You've got David Southam there, who's come across from Mincor, multi-billion-dollar company, took it all the way through to production. Starts as managing director in the 1st of February or mid-February next year. So we're really excited to get Dave on the road and start promoting the story. We've got Mike Boehm, who was also how we got to know Dave was through Mike Boehm. He's on the Mincor board and also ex-Ramelius board. And Sean High, of course, has been with us for a while as our legal counsel. I think also it's really important to see who our management is behind the team that's led the due diligence and led through to the discovery of what we're doing. We've got Gareth Reynolds here, who's in the crowd today. You should go see him at the booth. He was involved with the Tawana Bald Hill discovery, where they found up to 30 million tonnes. He also worked at Mineral Resources Lithium, and he also worked as an exploration manager at SQM. So a wealth of geological experience in the lithium space, and we certainly really happy to have him on board. We've got Duncan Grief, who also came across with us from Bellevue Gold. Bellevue is doing a boring infill drilling campaign at the moment, so it doesn't really get the geologists too excited when it's just infill. So he was a part of the discovery of the 3 million ounce ore body there at Bellevue Gold. So really good on resource growth. So that's exactly what we're trying to do over the next 6 months. talked about Steve Parsons and Mark Cordwood. He wrote the book on WA pegmatites, and he sits there as an advisor on the board. So we're really happy to have such a strong management team. So here's the main outcropping. So the previous owners of this, all they did was drill straight into the main outcropping, didn't step away from it at all. I joke with the geologist here that I'm an accountant by trade, but I reckon accountants could have drilled out the spodumene on this pegmatite because it's so visible and so much there. As you can see, good widths, great grade, so and only down to vertical 80 meters. So the opportunity here to drill this out really quickly, you know, what we're doing to a resource is great. Great looking crystals within the spodumene, so we're pretty happy about that, and so we look forward to drilling it. So this is one thing that got Mark Cordwood really excited when we're doing our DD. We're seeing spodumene crystals of up to 40 centimeters length and also 40% within the pegmatite. So that just bodes really well to how the processing might go up there, and the abundance of spodumene within the deposit looks really good. And so we know we've got plenty of spodumene, we know we've got plenty of lithium, but we're just drilling out to see how much we've actually got here, which is what our expertise is. So just on plan view, that's the mount outcropping there. They're the intercepts there that sit there of substance. Like I said, 15.6 at 1.6% lithium. So that's the deepest on section down, sort of vertical 80 to 100 meters. So no drilling below that, and it looks like it's getting thicker at depth. Just amazing. It's open along strike to the northeast and to the southwest. And like I said, this is what really surprises us. All they did was drill the main outcropping. It doesn't mean it doesn't, you know, keep going, you know, along strike. The guys have been out here and testing the outcropping that sits sort of all within sort of 100 meters of the mount outcropping. If you can believe it, it's never been tested for lithium. These are pegmatites. So the guys have gone out there, done their rock chips and sampling and channel sampling on these pegmatites, and we're really eagerly awaiting the results of those. But once again, you know, that is just so underexplored. We're just unbelievable that they haven't, they didn't go out and test these. So we think the scale certainly is there. And then the results of our LiDAR and magnetic survey that we did a month in after having the project. Once again, there's never been a drill hole outside this main area. That is 10 kilometers of strike. The guys have gone out there and rock chipped, and the results will be out in December. Pegmatite, 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 pegmatite. This is a fertile greenstone belt. So we are really looking forward to getting out there. We have rock chipped these, and we will putting out results of those rock chips probably around mid-December, you know, depending on the turnaround time in the labs. So we're super excited about what we're seeing there. And I think another really big opportunity for us, there's Gareth Reynolds, who I talked about earlier, sitting on one of the outcropping there of pegmatites, is the LiDAR that we did a couple of months ago. It just gave us a topography elevation of certain of the landscape. So what we wanted to go out and look is where the topography just elevates a little bit. And what we found is a lot of these elevated areas are covered by moss. So the guys went out there with their little picks under the moss pegmatite. Unbelievable. So what we're really excited about, so the guys have rock chipped these, but we really now have only scraped the surface of this 10-kilometer strike. So we're super excited to see, you know, what we can delineate over here over the next few months. And then what we worked on over the past month and a half is increase our land holding. We've now got 260 square kilometres in a world-class lithium province. So we initially picked up this 10-kilometre strike, which is what I've been talking about in the last few slides. And we've picked up all this area through here. We've now got 40 kilometres of strike. Another Canadian junior that didn't have any money. It's got a pegmatite rock chip there at 2.8% lithium. Never been drill tested. Can you believe it? 2 lithium booms, never been drill tested. A pegmatite rock tip down to the south here, 524 ppm tantalum, which is a great pathfinder for lithium. Never been drill tested. So the guys are, you know, we're really excited to get out there next summer once the snow clears and start testing those. So as you can see, this land holding here is massive, and the guys are going to be pretty busy there for the next few years. You know, outside of the main outcropping here, which is where we're doing the resource drilling out. So that's Canada, where we see, you know, the next 3 years where we think is really prime real estate. We do have a couple of other projects here in Western Australia from the original listing, and there also looks like there could be a lithium-bearing pegmatites on our ground here, which We went back and had a look at some of the historic drilling there, and we noticed there was pegmatites, and we did see some anomalies and niobium and tantalum really highly elevated. So we've gone back and auger tested those, and we're eagerly awaiting results of those as well. So we're now in two world-class provinces, being Western Australia and Quebec from a lithium perspective. So news flow, it's going to be ongoing for quite a while. We have put the results of the magnetics and LiDAR out. The guys have gone out and rock chipped all those pegmatites that I talked about, and we're hoping that those drill results come out pre-Christmas. We're hoping mid-December. We've got a whole heap of new regional targets now, which is pretty exciting. And as I alluded to earlier, we started a 10,000 metre drill campaign that kicked off in November. So one rig's continually turning to Christmas, and then we'll look at multiple rigs after Christmas. Just to highlight again that we do like getting multiple rigs out there, and we do like to drill. So as you can see, that drilling will go all the way through to at least July, August from our drilling campaign. And we'd like to put out a maiden resource. We're sort of looking at circa mid next year to be able to do that. So just to conclude on our investment highlights, we are in a world-class province here, one of the hottest lithium districts in the world. So we're really adjacent to world-class lithium projects. They're multi-billion-dollar projects, so we're certainly enthused about that. We're fully funded. We completed a raise today of $8 million, and that was done through the Canadian flow-through scheme. We got a placement price at 73 cents, even though our shares are trading at 50. So we're getting premiums on capital raisings, which is really anti-dilutive for us. We've got a low EV at the moment. We've got a hell of a lot of news flow coming out, which is great, particularly from the exploration. We've got 620 metres of outcropping that we're drilling at depth and along strike. So we know we've got spodumene-bearing pegmatites, and we're just going to drill them out. So it's just a matter of how much we've got. And then regionally, 10 kilometres initially of strike there, with which I talked about multiple pegmatite belts, and then a 40-kilometre strike. So we're just amazed that we've been able the last 3 to 4 months pick up such a massive land holding in one of the hottest lithium districts in the world. So we're looking forward to presenting our results over the next little while. That'll be constant news flow over the next 6 months. And we think we've got a really good team here to deliver on what we're saying. So super exciting, and we do have a history of returning significant shareholder value from Bellevue, Minkor, or Teco. So we're looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Dreadnought Resources is a West Australian mineral explorer focused on discovering the minerals for our future. Managing Director Dean Tuck joins us to give an update on exploration across his portfolio of critical metal projects. Please welcome Dean Tuck.
Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for being here. This has been a fantastic session put on by Stu, Prue, and the rest of the crew. It's some fantastic companies presenting before here. It's been great listening to those present and see lots of great exploration being done by ASX listed companies. So it's a pleasure to be up here. Last session of the day. We'll try and get through the conference and get an update on what we're doing at Dreadnought. Make sure the thingamajigger works. And disclaimer. So Dreadnought Resources, we've been around for about 3 and a bit years now. But a quick overview, we're a junior exploration company focused in Western Australia. We have a fantastic board and management team, probably one of the most active and most passionate exploration teams I think that's on the ASX at the moment, out there in the field at the moment, delivering multiple drill programs. And we have a fantastic board with a stellar track record. And in the last 3.5 years, we've delivered a number of discoveries that have seen us go from a 3 to 5 mil market cap up to the 300 mil market cap that we are today. That's driven most recently on the back of the rare earths. And since this is the Resurgence conference, which was the first conference I ever presented at 2 years ago, back when we were sub 2 cents, I want to spend a bit of time today talking about our carbonatites, which we announced this morning, and do a little bit of different twist to the conference slide presentation because I've been giving away too many conferences this year. So we have 3.3 million invested to date by board and management. We have significant skin in the game. We've averaged over at one ASX announcement every single week since we listed 3.5 years ago. That keeps me very busy, and I have a lot of ASX announcements to right before the end of the year. We've delivered multiple discoveries by doing what we think is how an exploration company should be run: boots on the ground, money in the ground, and putting drill holes into good targets. So let's talk about Mangaroon. This is certainly what's driving a lot of our value at the moment. We originally pegged about 4,500 square kilometers of ground, vacant ground in the Gascoyne region in November 2020. We originally targeted nickel, which we have joint ventured with First Quantum, who's doing a 12-kilometer long fixed loop EM survey at the moment, chasing up some high tenor nickel, copper, PGE sulfides. And once we did that deal with First Quantum, we turned our attention, some of our young geos were keen to go chase some rare earths, being next door to Hastings. We did a quick review of the region, reprocessed the government available data, and the first outcrop we kicked over came back 12% rare earths. We did met work on that pretty quick, which we'll talk about in a second, showed that the rare earths were real. We're probably one of the only companies listed anywhere that has a second mover advantage for rare earths, which can be quite a complicated sort of exploration commodity to go after. So to have proven metallurgical recoveries and a proven flow sheet already developed by 15 years of Hastings next door was certainly a fantastic boon for us and some shoulders that we could get on top of to advance our project relatively quickly. And over the last, we also have some carbonatites, which I'll talk about in a second, which could be a step change opportunity for the region. So, brief overview of the project area. To date, we have proven scale and grade. Over the last, until a year and a half ago, the only ironstones in the region were up here on Hastings ground, the north side of Lions River Fault. Over the last 12 to 16 months, we've identified over 30 strike kilometers of ironstones south of Lions River Fault and 7 carbonatite intrusions. What we're seeing here is the Gifford Creek ferrocarbonatite complex turning into a globally significant rare earth province. And we have multiple rigs drilling at the moment, and we have for the last 6 to 8 months, proving that scale, and we'll be definitely drilling a lot more next year. We've also produced some of the thickest and highest grade intercepts that this region has ever seen. So the Yangibana ironstones have been known about since the 80s and 90s as rare earth bearing ferrocarbonatite dikes. And our first drill program, our first 6 holes, put out some of the thickest and highest grade intercepts that region has ever seen in 15, 20, 30 years of drilling. So it's very encouraging. We're seeing the scale. We're going to be proving that up over the next 12 months, and we're seeing some fantastic grade for that region. We've also have the right mineralogy. We have a dominance of monazite. Some of the fresh rock is monazite with a bit of rare earth carbonates with bastnasite. We have proven, before we even drilled a hole, as I alluded to before, we actually did a flotation float test on our outcrop before we ever drilled a hole to show that we could produce a high quality monazite concentrate. I think we had 93% recovery, 40% trio, and quite high NdPr in that. So a very high value concentrate. And we have just completed 20 diamond holes into Yin, and those holes have now all been delivered to IMO, with guidance by Primero, Damien Krebs, and going to ALS as well. So we have some of the best people in the game working on the rare earth met, and we'll continue to see what we come up with. And quite beautiful, stunning things to see on outcrop. We're seeing these big chunky monazite crystals, and in diamond core, there we go, from Yin, seeing nice chunky monazites as well. So if the Mets can't work with that, then I'll be coming after them. So, and building on with that Met, one of the things that makes the Gifford Creek ferrocarbonatite complex so unique globally is the NdPr ratio. So when it comes to rare earths, you have trio in the ground, you produce a concentrate, and that concentrate becomes a global commodity. You have Iluka building a refinery nearby that processes monazite and xenotime. You have Linus in Kalgoorlie processes monazite and soon to be processing apatite in Kalgoorlie. And Hastings will be building a hydromet facility up in Onslow, and that's just in WA. Keeping in mind that now you have monazite from concentrate from Linus being trucked all the way down to Perth and then sent on a ship up to Malaysia. So it truly is a global commodity, and the average neodymium praseodymium concentration or ratio within that concentrate globally is around 15 to 25%. The Gifford Creek ferrocarbonatite complex is a freak. It's quite unique globally. It's the only place that has higher NdPr ratios than that. We average Dreadnought drilling and our rock chips and all the work today, we're averaging 30%, over 30% NdPr, which means that our concentrate that we can produce from this project and from this region is some of the highest value concentrate for rare earths anywhere in the world. And that's a huge selling point that Hastings has been building on for years, and that we are also starting to see with the work that we're doing. So this morning we announced some of the first drill results of our carbonatites. So for the last 30 years, the Gifford Creek ferrocarbonatite complex has been all about these ironstone dikes. And the question has always been, ever since Newmont explored the area in the 90s, and as Hastings talks about quite a bit as well, where are the source intrusions for all these ironstone dikes, these late-stage pulses of carbonatites that are shooting out? They should be emanating out from a central intrusion. And that carbonatite complex looks like, so these are three world-class examples up here. You have Ngwala in Tanzania, which is owned by Peak. You have Mountain Pass in USA, which is actually called Sulfide Queen, but we call it Mountain Pass, and Mount Weld in Australia, controlled by Linus. Each of these is to scale. And talking about some of the carbonatites, one of the things that's really important to take into consideration is your carbonatites are these quite large intrusions at Ngwala and Mount Weld. Mountain Pass is actually this very small body, which is quite unique, which I quite like. I'll talk about in a second. And what you have here in Ngwala, in the center area, you have a rare earth dominant deposit. And then you have phosphate deposits. You have niobium sitting out here on the edges. You have fluorite sitting out in the phenite alteration zone with niobium as well. Same thing, you go to Mount Weld. The central lanthanide deposit sits right in the middle. You have niobium deposits sitting down here, niobium deposits sitting up there, and phosphate deposits sitting over here. So if we were to actually take this and simplify them a little bit, when you have these carbonatite intrusions, you have a very large carbonatite intrusive complex. And then within that, you have an area of rare earth mineralization. You also tend to have areas of niobium or titanium or phos or whatever else. They're quite a mixed bag of delicious things. And so the question for us when we identified these carbonatites for the first time just over 12 months ago was where within our carbonatites are we actually going to find the rare earth mineralization? And so over here is the outline of our C1, C2 to 5, and C6 intrusive carbonatite complexes. And the question was, how do we actually design a drill program to tap into these rare earths most effectively and efficiently? And so what we have done and the approach that we have taken, I believe, we have essentially we took all the carbonatite deposits around the world and we looked at what sort of grid spacing over this thing, because our carbonatites were all undercover, what sort of grid spacing that we could drill a shallow vertical hole through cover, through weathered rock, and tap into that fresh rock would let us know that we are in the right area of mineralization within that carbonatite intrusion. So what you see here is an example about the roughly 200 by 200 meter space grid over Mount Weld, Ngwala, and Sulfide Queen. Sulfide Queen, which is Mountain Pass, that's 750 by 150 meters. So a grid program like that would hit 1 to 3 holes into that body. So we did that similar grid, and that's what we have just announced today is the results of that first pass drilling, visual results, if you will. And we've identified 6 zones within the intrusions that we've drilled to date of rare earth, niobium, titanium, and phosphate mineralization. All confirmed by PXRF. We don't put out PXRF results because they're dodgy, but we use them as a way of saying that we have hit mineralization, and we'll get these assays out as quickly as possible. I see Ben from ALS back there chuckling. He's promised me 6 or 7 XRF machines next year. I'm just kidding, but they are trying to install capacity in Perth for us for next year because we're going to be drilling these things very intensely next year to prove up these things and also to test the rest of the carbonatites to find more zones of mineralization. Digging into that complex around C3 a little bit more, that complex around the C3 is around 600 by 550 meters, multiple holes drilled into that. And I just want to point out that some of the drill holes in there, we had 4 of them end in mineralization, and some of them over 99 meters thick, coming from a depth of only 2 meters. So some of the mineralization that we're seeing in this carbonatite complex with rare earths, phosphate, niobium, and the rest are extremely thick. And all we've done is just drill some vertical, shallow holes through the cover, through the regolith, the residual material, and then just tapped 3 rods into fresh rock. Vertical holes, wide spaced. We have just started drilling today, 80-meter fence line follow-up drilling, which is really designed. Now that we've honed in on an area that is mineralized, we're going to hopefully make that significant discovery on the back of this. I mean, we could consider that a discovery already once we get the assay results in, but really this follow-up program is designed to really test this and really hit these zones of mineralization extremely hard. So we're very excited by what we've seen so far from that program. It's been a resounding success. Assay results will come out and be the proof in the pudding as we go through, but we're very, very encouraged. And then beyond that, before we touch into that, a bit of upside as well. So the other thing that we learned was that the carbonatites were significantly larger than what we thought and we originally interpreted. We had originally a conservative magnetic interp, And on the back of the drilling, only 2 holes drilled through and into the country rock outside the carbonatite complex. And so we've expanded that interb with that new information, and that C2 to C5 complex is now nearly twice as big and a bit wider and a lot longer than before. So we will do first pass drilling on that next year, in addition to the follow-up drilling. In addition to that, we talked about C6 before. So we talked about carbonatites tend to go over these crustal scale structures, the Lions River Fault, which is the main structure here. You have Yangibana to the north of it, you have Yin to the south, and C1 to C5 sits right on that crustal scale structure, as you'd expect from any carbonatite complex. And that Lions River Fault is what's running through here. So the next main structure down, where C6 is, that's a splay off the Lions River Fault between the Edmund and the Tea Tree Shear Zone. That's our C6 anomaly. That's the government magnetic data highlighting Mount Weld, the original C6 with that low resolution data. This is wider space data than at Mount Weld. We've flown detailed magnetics over the area, which gives much higher resolution image of that. And that's the government gravity. If you guys have followed WA1 recently and their exciting discovery out in the Arunta, this is a similar mag plus grav, hopefully equals carbonatites out here. So extremely encouraged to be drilling this next year as well. So the upcoming news flow for us, we see we have a lot of assays coming through. We've put out the last 120 holes from Yin. So hopefully in December we will be delivering our maiden resource on Yin. We also have our assay results coming through from Sabre, from Y8, our first fence lines that we drilled at the carbonatites, and the first pass 86 holes that we drilled 160 by 160 meter space drilling at the carbonatites. Those assay results should be coming through continuously over the next couple of months. We are still drilling. We'll be drilling into December, and we'll have a lot of assays and a lot of news flow coming through on exploration and discoveries into next year. We also, start of next year, come mid-Feb, early March, depending on the weather, we'll be back on site with 2 RC rigs and 1 to 2 diamond rigs, and we'll be chasing after the carbonatites, the Yin extensions, infill drilling, and really aiming to deliver more discoveries and more resources so that we can be in a position by the end of next year to commence scoping studies. And to support that, like I alluded to before, we've already submitted our first 20 holes of diamond drilling from Yin to the labs. Come March, April, we'll have those results back. Again, that MET will feed into the scoping study work by the end of the year, and we'll continue to collect diamond sampling throughout all the prospects that get met across all of our samples, across all of our future deposits. So we'll be delivering resource upgrades and resources and MET work pretty much nonstop for the next 12 months. So over the next 6 months, main catalyst, like I alluded to there, lots of assays coming through, maiden resource coming out. We have recommencement of drilling, and in the back end MET work, and then in the background we also have work going on with First Quantum on the nickels at the Money Intrusion, chasing up and trying to define drill targets to test next year, fully funded by First Quantum. And we also have the Taraji Yampi project in the Kimberley, which will be hitting pretty well next year as well, to follow up on the Orion copper gold discovery. We have some outstanding work from that. There's a lot of news flow coming out from Dreadnought here shortly. So thank you all very much.
Ian Prentice is Managing Director of Technology Metals Australia. That company is developing the Murchison Technology Metals Project in the Midwest here of Western Australia, which will be the world's next long-life, high-purity vanadium project. Vanadium is becoming well recognized as a critical mineral for long-duration energy storage as we move to net zero. Please welcome Ian Prentice.
Thank you, Jerry. Thanks to RIU and Vertical Events for putting on the show, and thanks to our sponsors for the event. Particular big shout out to Argonaut for including us in the Best Undeveloped Projects publication that's just come out. So very exciting times. Big change of pace now. We're talking about a vanadium development project. So we're not an explorer. We've done the exploration. We've defined resources, reserves, done a heap of work on the engineering and metallurgical, and now we're moving into development of, as Jerry said, the next primary vanadium project in the world. This is all available on the website. So the key to us, and I'll touch on it a bit further into this, and Dave Franklin spoke about it this morning, is looking at some of the, I guess, the geopolitical tensions that are going on, and vanadium is very much in the crosshairs in that space as far as where do you get reliable supply of vanadium. So we're blessed with having a fantastic tier 1 project in a tier 1 jurisdiction here in Western Australia, just down the road from Meekatharra, really ideally located as far as infrastructure and the support for development of a project. Mentioned high ESG standards, very key when you're developing projects of this nature. It's critical minerals, metals, and the support from various government sources of funding for these sort of projects. So having really high ESG standards and being in a jurisdiction like Australia is very, very important. We are going to be part of the global energy transition as far as being able to provide vanadium into large-scale energy storage for long-duration applications. And importantly for us as investors, we've got a whole bunch of near-term catalysts that we think will really drive the share price and move things forward for us. On that ESG front, people and community and what we're doing is very, very important as we're moving into development of a project. How we interact with our community. We've got a long life asset here that we're going to be developing, and engagement with the community and getting people involved and supportive of that development is really, really key. So very big part of our journey, and very much supported by our board and management team. We've had some changes over the last 12 months to our board and management. We've brought on Jackie Murray, joined us about this time last year as part of an investment from Resource Capital Funds, who are now our cornerstone shareholder. And then Dr. Carmen Letton joined us just more recently in August of this year. So Carmen brings a fantastic CV, ex-Anglo-American, very project development and project improvement, continuous improvement focus. So really strong changes into our board. And then on our management front, we've got David English, who some of you may be aware of as our Chief Operating Officer. David was very much involved in building DeCrussa for Samphire and Nova for Independence, but also spent a couple of years as General Manager Operations at the Windermurra Vanadium Project, which is the only previous operating vanadium project in Western Australia. So really key experience on this journey we're on at the moment to bring our project into development. And then I guess the other one, Alicia Sybil, who came on just more recently as our CFO, came out of FMG. Fantastic skill sets to really build, and as we transition from what was a junior explorer into a developer and ultimately a producer of critical minerals. So a bit of a zoom in on the project itself. We are one of the world's largest undeveloped vanadium projects, and also one of the highest grade undeveloped projects. And recently we just got even bigger. So currently reserve, which we brought out in the middle of about August of this year, 44.5 million tonnes, supports, as I say, a 25-year mine life. We'll be doing traditional open pit mining, ore body outcrops, very straightforward, conventional processing in the vanadium space, all integrated on site. And at 12,500 tonnes per annum average over the life of mine, will be the largest single primary vanadium producer on the globe. Importantly, what we've completed in the recent times is what we've called an integration study. So that the deposit down the bottom of that chart, the Yarrabubba, we've integrated into the overall project, to the Murchison Technology Metals project. Yarrabubba is really important in that not only does it provide us high-grade vanadium feed, but also delivers an ilmenite byproduct. So we actually have two revenue streams whilst we're mining down at Yarrabubba. And that's a key differentiator for us that sets us apart from all our peers and really does have a big impact on the economics of our project. Earlier this month, we brought out an updated resource statement, which is the details are on that diagram, 153.7 million tonnes now in resource. Most importantly, the indicated and measured component of that increased up to 63 million tonnes. Previously, we were sitting at 50 million tonnes, supporting a 44 million tonne reserve. Now at 63 million tonnes, we're expecting that reserve to grow in line with that increase, and again, boost that mine life. And really importantly in that is some of that material we've converted across from inferred into indicated and measured is close to surface. So it's going to have a really big impact on our economics. Slide back into the bit of geology, but it I guess demonstrates how straightforward it's going to be from a mining proposition. Fantastic geometry for an open pit deposit. The pink or red layer there is the economic driver. So high grade vanadium in a nice thick chute. So 15-20 metre wide layer of high grade vanadium mineralisation. Really important for us is that fresh at surface. So for our processing point of view, we get really good recoveries at a coarse grind size. So those in the operational space will understand that has a big impact both on capital and operating costs. So we get sort of world-leading recoveries at a coarse grain size, which means that we can get be at the bottom end of the cost curve. I guess also really importantly, I've just come back from a trip to visit some European investors and a partner in Japan, talking about low-cost energy. So the energy crisis globally, we're very fortunate in Western Australia where we have still got some reasonably priced gas resources. So really important for our process that we've got this ability to source some good, reliable supply of gas at pretty competitive pricing. So all of that is what really is going to deliver us a very, very compelling project and what we're calling an implementation study. So we're going through right now, delivering on that implementation study, delivering a bankable financial model, and we'll be very much positioning us as the bottom of the cost curve in the vanadium space. So what this implementation phase is all about. We've done the integration work. We know what the project looks like. We've done all the engineering and the metallurgy. We've done the reserve. We're now in a final stages really of a commercial competitive tendering process. So we've gone direct to market. Our own team has gone, as proponents, have gone direct to market for pricing on pretty well all the kit we need and all the supporting infrastructure we need to develop the project. So we're not doing a study per se. So that's why we call it an implementation phase rather than a study, because we're not going to an engineering house to do a study for us. We're actually going direct to market, and those inputs will be going straight into our financial model, and then that's what we'll be going to the banks with around the financing. So real market, real pricing that will take us through into that implementation. So why vanadium? It's not something that everyone talks about. On the top of everyone's list is why you'd be mining vanadium. I guess vanadium 101, the vast majority of vanadium is used in steel. So steel additive, 90% of vanadium still currently is used in steel. The more vanadium you use in steel, the less steel you need for an application. So therefore, you get some real benefits from an emissions point of view. You're generating less steel, making less steel for the certain application. So that durability and lower emissions really key. But the big one for us is the vanadium redox flow battery space. So that's where we're going to be seeing a lot of vanadium being used, and it's really, I guess, long duration energy storage. As we move more and more into renewables, we go through the transition away from hydrocarbons. We're going to be using a lot more large scale, long duration storage, and the vanadium redox flow batteries are ideally placed to deliver on that. Some numbers out of CRU looking at the overall stationary storage market and the changes over time, and their forecasts that the battery market and particularly the VRFBs are going to take up a very big chunk of the stationary storage market, energy storage market, over the next few decades. And we're seeing that, as it talks about in their sort of current markets, around 110,000 tonnes of vanadium. As I say, 90% of that currently used in steel. We're seeing huge growth coming into the vanadium redox flow batteries. Very much a real focus for us as far as our downstream opportunities. So, you can see this whole change in the product mix of where vanadium is going to be going to over the course of the next couple of decades. Bit back to where Dave Franklin was talking about. He didn't actually mention vanadium when he talked about the geopolitical climate around the world, but really interestingly, 78% of last year's vanadium supply came from China and Russia combined. The real key takeaway for me out of that is China sort of is self-sufficient. They consume pretty well everything they make, so that's not really a big participant in the external market. The stuff that comes out of Russia, 16% of global supply, 44% of Western world consumption of vanadium comes from Russia. So we've just recently come back from a ferroalloy conference, which was pretty exciting. But the big takeaway from that was the North Americans, Europeans are saying, we don't want to be buying product from Russia. We need to have an alternative source. Obviously, Australia, one of the allies of all those countries, really ideally suited to be that replacement for that product from Russia. So we're in a really great place. The thematic around large-scale energy storage is really getting a lot of momentum. Vanadium redox flow batteries are getting a lot of support in the market. And now we've got this geopolitical situation where the market is looking for alternatives in supply. So we've been working on this for quite some time as far as building partnerships and relationships. LE System is a Japanese group that is very big in the vanadium electrolyte space and has got really strong linkages into the vanadium redox flow battery companies. Managed to get up there and visit them for the last couple of weeks and head out to their electrolyte site. Fantastic supporters of us. We'll be working with them to do downstream conversion of our vanadium into vanadium electrolyte here in WA. Really key is that then facilitates the ability to actually build these batteries here. If you're not making the electrolyte locally, it's really hard to roll out these batteries locally. By us taking our high purity vanadium, working with LE Systems on their technology, delivering the vanadium electrolyte here, we can actually really help facilitate that whole industry. And then more recently, we announced an MOU with Tata Steel. The Indian market is, we often hear about it, but the steel market in India is growing dramatically. They're also looking at really increasing the quality of their steel over time. So that all lines up with more vanadium use. So Tata is a really strong bridge for us to get into that market. But really, more importantly, I was on the WA government trade mission to India in July. The big takeaway I got from that is the amount of renewable energy they're deploying across India, and therefore the amount of energy storage, long duration storage they're going to require will eclipse what's happening in Europe. So India is a massive market for vanadium, and we've really got a great opportunity with a partnership with Tata to really access that marketplace. I guess alongside of all that, we're maintaining our own, equilibrium, our own momentum, into the electrolyte space. So we're part of the FBI CRC here in WA, the Future Battery Industry Cooperative Research Centre. Very much we're a key investor in this project. So looking at how we can more effectively and efficiently convert our material into electrolyte and then deliver into these vanadium redox flow batteries. So real commitment into that R&D space. Corporate overview, we're very, very well placed. As I said, Resource Capital Funds came on board about 12 months ago, part of a $20 million capital raise. At the end of September, we still had $15 million cash at bank, 210 million shares on issue. So really strong register, really strong supportive shareholder base, and a very clear pathway through to development. So the story for us and the key takeaway is we are poised for construction in 2023. The technical work, the economic work is all coming to fruition by the end of this year, early next year. Environmental approvals are well advanced. Engagement with our traditional owners on country is really well advanced. So we've got a very clear strategy to be starting to implement our project in about the middle of next year and move through from there, construction, commissioning, and into production of high purity vanadium here in the West. Really strong quality partners across industry, but also government. And as I said before, really key to developing a project of this nature is engagement with groups like NAIF, groups like Export Finance Australia, and other credit agencies around the globe. So very much a very, very compelling investment story, I believe. Very globally significant project. As mentioned, we will be the 4th primary vanadium producer on the globe. We will be the largest primary vanadium producer on the globe. In a time when vanadium growth is happening, we're going to need more and more vanadium. So we're really ideally situated to be delivering this critical mineral, which is really going to support this transition that we all talk about. We've got a great team, great board, great management team that are going to deliver on the project, and a really good, key investors and shareholders on the register that are going to support this whole ambition through delivery of the project. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ian. And so to our final presentation. Shane Kenworthy, Principal Consultant at CSA Global, joins us today to talk about a methodology used to classify and rank gold targets and focus exploration in the data-rich Davyhurst region of Western Australia. Please make him welcome, Shane Kenworthy.
Okay. Thank you, and thank you, RIU, for having me up here, and thank you for the people in the audience, because it's a bit of a curious talk compared to the rest of today, so thanks for having the curiosity to listen to it. So this talk is a case study of a consulting project we undertook for a client, and the aim of the project was to develop a framework and methodology to rank and prioritise a large number of exploration targets that the client had defined. It's fairly common work for an exploration company, but what differentiates this project, I think, a little bit is the application of data analytics and a bit of automation into the process. So I'd like to acknowledge Ora Banda Mining. They were the client who gave us the opportunity to work on this project and also to present today. Ora Banda are owners of the Davyhurst project in the eastern goldfields of Western Australia, which is one of the best endowed regions for gold on earth. Ora Banda have a large ground position about 150 kilometres west of Kalgoorlie. And at the time we undertook this project, their mining tenure stretched over about 200 kilometres, and it covers greenstone sequences, which are the primary host for gold in the area. Davyhurst is a relatively mature project. Central to the project is the Davyhurst Mill, which is surrounded by 6 deposits with ore reserves totaling about 460,000 ounces of gold, and a further 23 deposits with mineral resources totaling over about 2 million ounces of gold. Ora Banda are actively exploring to improve and grow the metal inventory at Davyhurst, and their geologists had defined over 270 exploration targets that covered mines through the untested regions. And these targets have been generated from a variety of sources, internally, and also through a number of consultants. So we were contracted to help classify and rank these exploration targets to aid them with their prioritisation of exploration. We weren't really doing a targeting studying. So exploration targeting and ranking is relatively common process for an exploration company. The challenge of this project was the number of targets, the spatial distribution of those targets over such a large area, and the quantity of data within which the targets are located. An indication of some of that data is on the slide, and it's worth thinking about how an individual might approach this and the time required, and how they'd stay consistent and also motivated as they trawled through all this kind of data and information. So a lot of work had already gone into defining the targets, and the problem had become one of how to manage and prioritise them. And in this case, one of the key challenges was integrating and effectively using such large data sets. So even after reducing the available data that they hold down to some key data sets, some of these data sets are still so large, they don't fit in typical software packages anymore, like Excel and so forth. So the approach we took to tackle this was kind of a data analytics approach using the Python programming language. We didn't try to reinvent the wheel around targeting and classification. We just employed a variety of existing frameworks that the industry uses in general, but we brought them together in something of a programmatic type way. Within Python, there are a range of open source libraries which provide the foundation to do many of the tasks needed for a project like this. And some of the key libraries that we employed include pandas. You manipulate tabular data like Excel spreadsheet type stuff in that, NumPy, GDAL, and GeoPandas for those interested, that are good for geospatial processing and calculations. The benefit of this type of approach is that a solution can be tailored that might be difficult or impossible to do within individual software, and also that the computer is doing the heavy lifting when it comes to organising and sorting the data, and it brings an element of auditability and repeatability to the process. So the overarching framework we used to tackle this problem was to consider the information in 3 themes. Firstly, an operational information on how we can classify these targets such that we can get an indication of stage, or perhaps even a risk-reward profile. Secondly, conceptual information on why we think a particular area is geologically favourable to host mineralisation. And thirdly, empirical information or historical type information on what do we know about the target we're classifying and ranking. So in this context, we're going to seek data that we're typically going to engineer into information under one of those 3 themes, and then apply an algorithm to classify and rank the targets. So classifying from operational information. There are many ways to classify a target. In this case, we use development stage and a risk-reward type approach. So targets within a mine or a mineral resource environment are perhaps better understood and to a degree de-risked, and can often be more rapidly converted into a mineral reserve base, and from there generate revenue, hopefully. Whereas a greenfields or a regional target has less information, so they may be perceived as riskier, but they could be very high value and almost certainly going to take a longer lead time to generate a return. So schematically, what I'm showing on the right-hand side of the slide is we start with a range of features in white, pits and resources and all these kind of data layers. Then we do some geospatial analysis, calculate distances from them and so forth. Then we take each of the targets that these guys have defined, or Urbana have defined. We extract a distance for each target based on these kind of features. And then we apply an algorithm. Does it have a mine? Does it have a mineral resource? Is it proximal to a mineral resource? Or is it just further away from a mineral resource, more akin to a greenfields target, or let's call them regional in this case? So in this case, the classification gives a distribution of targets down there in the bottom that you'd probably be fairly comfortable with. There's less targets in the mine and resource categories, and you've got an increasing number of targets in the resource and regional categories, which you kind of expect given that mines and resources are much rarer. The next step is looking at geological favourability. So we've classified them into what we think where they should be in that kind of development stage. Now we need to look at their prospectivity. This is where we apply our knowledge of how ore deposits form and mineral systems to predict the most favourable areas or the highest probability areas to find the next deposit, or at least to hone our exploration in. For this area, the research in gold deposits is fairly advanced, and it's pretty amenable to a mineral systems approach. These deposits form after the enclosing rocks due to a lot of fluids moving through. The source of the fluids is fairly contentious, but it's typically similar between deposits over large areas. The concentration of gold is considered very low, so to form a deposit requires the focusing of very large quantities of gold-bearing fluids. And this happens at a variety of scales. At the largest scale are pathways, such as crustal faults and antiformal combinations that focus the fluids. At smaller scales are physical traps, where deformation within and adjacent to these structures creates favourable fault fraction networks, for example, which the fluids can be focused into and deposit gold. And it's also generally considered that the gold is carried as a bisulfide complex, and that the gold deposition will occur when this fluid interacts with iron-rich rock types, which favour gold deposition, or chemical traps at the local scale. So conceptually, on our left, we've got like a conceptual diagram how this mineral system might form, but then we need to translate this into something more practical that we could define on a map. So we've used the mineral systems tree, or a table basically, that relates these processes to mappable features, then create a series of GIS layers right over on the right that reflect these features. We apply some expert weightings. We create a model reflecting the coincidence of all these features, and hopefully we can predict areas that are favourable for mineralisation. But ultimately, we end up with a representation of the areas that have elements we think are important to find mineralisation, and we assign these back to the targets. Having defined the areas we geologically like for mineralisation, the next step would be to test them. But in the case of an area like Davyhurst, where there's a good degree of exploration maturity, it's important to answer questions a bit more along the lines of what has previously been done and what kind of success has been encountered. And the problem with such a large number of targets and very large data sets is this becomes quite difficult to manage. In this project, there was over 1.8 million drill records and 190,000 surface samples. Any of them may or may not overlap a target. So some targets may have been effectively tested and by one of other of these exploration techniques, and some targets haven't been tested at all. Our approach to make sense of this was take these large tables of data, select the data within each target, and engineer some features to help us evaluate those targets. So in the case of drilling, we've got a big table up there on the right where the data's come from. Take the top 5 intercepts by grade and create a record generated similar to what a general purpose user would receive and likely understand, which is in the bottom right there. So there's quite a lot of information in there. We have, for example, the target 1, the first intercept, we've got 1 metres at extremely high gold grade from 0 metres at the surface in that drill hole. And then we've got no additional data, but if we go further down, we can see we've got basalt, for example, MB and FR for fresh rock. So we've captured quite a lot of information on what's been occurring in those targets. So this can give us a lot of information to evaluate it. You know, we can tell whether the mineralisation here is in the regolith or transported cover, whether it's in the bedrock, whether it's an isolated high-grade intercept or a series of high grades, what type of rocks are hosting the mineralisation and how they correspond to our mineralisation model, whether we're actually testing the things we think we're testing. And in many ways, it's a good screening tool. So having engineered all these features for each target, we've got most of what we need to rank them. But there's not really a good rule book around ranking or classifying targets. So it comes back to defining a strategy or a set of criteria to focus the exploration efforts. In this case, 6 ranks were used to prioritise the targets, and number 1 being highest, down to 6 being lowest. The strategy is pretty simple. It's targets at the highest gold grades in drilling. or targets that had limited drill testing but high surface sample results, or just targets that generally haven't been tested in the past. And the focus is on near resource and regional targets, and just accept that the mine and resource targets warrant follow-up, but under a different set of conditions. In addition, at this stage, put a threshold on the geological favorability or prospectivity and just turn it into a binary type thing, whether we believe it's simply favorable or less favorable geologically. So putting all this together gives a ranked target kind of pipeline. Emphasis is placed on the empirical ranking, the historical information in this area, partly reflecting the exploration maturity of the project. And it also somewhat makes sense to focus on areas that have good results for immediate follow-up. It's by no means the only strategy that could be employed, for example. There could be other approaches, more subtle approaches around it. In general, a large portion of the targets are highly ranked, which makes sense in this kind of setting, given that many cases someone has likely selected the target based on existing results and so forth. You've got to remember this, again, this is kind of a data, very large data. We've got a lot of targets, we've got a lot of data. How do we prioritize and rank them now? Of the total exploration targets, about 60 are sitting in the regional, 20% in the near resource, and 10% each of the resource and mine categories. Probably a reasonable pipeline with room to grow the resource and mine categories from the near resource and regional categories. And in all cases, there's a smaller portion of targets within favoured geology and a larger portion in less favoured geology. And that's interesting in that it brings into question some of the assumptions applied to what's geologically favourable in the area. And if you kind of flip it around, you can also highlight opportunities that might exist. So this presentation hopefully showed the value of interlinking data analytics with the more conventional frameworks of target classification and ranking. Employing a data analytics approach provides the advantage of really being able to leverage and integrate large data sets, which is great in say a mature or very data-rich region, such as the Yilgarn. And the tools now exist to do this type of work, and they're much more accessible. And I'm not a computer programmer by background, for example. And it wasn't without challenges. Being able to generate information, much like those tables of historical information, can lead to additional questions, and it doesn't make the decisions around those questions easier. So what are the rankings we want to apply, for example? And this case study was not about using AI to try and make those decisions for us. But the process we used allows repeatability and auditability. It's perhaps a more rigorous framework than what an individual might have achieved. At this scale of the study, it really was screening level for each target, but really it's amenable more to a deeper dive afterwards. And it's adaptable to rerunning and allowing changing assumptions and seeing where that leads. Thank you. Short and sweet, hopefully.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Shane. That brings us to the end of proceedings for today, ladies and gentlemen. We shall see you in the morning when we start a bit early at 8:50. See you then.